Welcome back, Miko.
Good to see you again. Thank you for having me again.
Good to see you too. Last time I saw you was at your event at MIT. I thought that was a very informative discussion there.
It was great to see you there. That's right.
All right, Miko. So I'm pretty sure you heard the news. I want to go ahead and dive right in with the announcement from the UN Security Council. For those who are not aware, Security Council actually passed the resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire during Ramadan. I know you guys see the picture here of the representative from the United States, and she always seems to have her hand up. This time she did not vote against the resolution. This time she voted to abstain, and the resolution was able to pass. But I do want to hear from you, Miko, because I've heard different opinions about what this resolution actually does. Is this a permanent ceasefire? And do you think that this is actually going to uphold?
You know, I think the best way to put this in context is to compare it to another genocide. Can you imagine during World War II, as millions and millions of people were being murdered by the Nazis, that, first of all, the United Nations, the US, you know, the powers that be, wait until a vote and then ask the perpetrator of the genocide if they agree to the terms of a ceasefire while arming them with the weapons to continue the genocide, and then waiting for them to take their time and decide whether or not they agree to stop the genocide. You know, people are pretending like there's some kind of a symmetry here between the perpetrators and the victims of a genocide. And again, I'm saying the word genocide in case somebody doesn't understand the full meaning of this horrific slaughter of human beings that has taken place in Gaza over the last few months. So I think it's a farce. I think the entire conversation about ceasefire is a farce. I think a ceasefire is the most inappropriate response, is a completely inappropriate response to genocide. Genocide calls for severe sanctions, for imposing on the perpetrator of the genocide severe sanctions to the point where they are choked. They can no longer commit the genocide. They have no bullets, no guns, no tanks, no planes, no nothing. They cannot move until they stop. That's the appropriate response. Another resolution, ceasefire this, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Ramadan, not Ramadan. This is, you know, it's horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth here. And there was actually a statement from the State Department about this resolution. And I think people need to hear this. Shout out to Asal Rod. Watch Matt Lee ask State Department spokesperson about the passing of the UN ceasefire resolution. So I want you guys to hear what he says here, because I saw people cheering this on social media, and I am very hesitant to get excited. Just like you guys will see later on that decision about Julian Assange. I'm going to talk about that as well. I'm hesitant to get excited because I think you need to hear the context. So listen to what Matt actually said about that ceasefire resolution.
For to the
okay, but the abstention means that you're okay with it. You're willing to go along with it, and so what do you expect now to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think,
do you expect that Israel is going to announce a ceasefire?
I do not.
And that do you expect that Hamas is going to release hostages?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we have objected to for some time is that most of the people that call for a ceasefire, we believe, are calling for Israel to unilaterally stop operations and not calling for Hamas to agree to a ceasefire where they would release hostages.
Well, I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It could, but but the resolution today is a non-binding resolution. But
okay, so what's the point?
Well,
why did you abstain? Why didn't you veto?
We didn't veto because we thought the language in it was consistent with something that the language as it relates to the ceasefire and release of hostage was consistent with the long-standing United States position.
So you don't believe anything is going to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think that separate and apart from this resolution, we have active, ongoing negotiations to try to achieve achieve what this resolution calls for, which is the an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages. I don't know. I can't say that this resolution is going to have any impact on those negotiations. But those.
Let me pause here for a second. See what I was talking about, Miko? So he said that it's non-binding, and I've seen a lot of people on social media cheering on this resolution.
Yeah, I mean, it's not binding. Israel doesn't see any international resolution, international law, any of these things binding as far as Israel is concerned. Israel lives in its own sphere. It's got diplomatic cover by the United States. Why should it care one way or the other if it's binding, if it's not binding? This is all upside for Israel. I mean, they're killing as many people as they want. They're causing famine and God knows what disease and all kinds of horrific reality for Palestinians in Gaza. They are still, you know, America's favorite. Why Netanyahu is doing? He's strong politically. This is all upside for Israel. So this is not going to make any difference whatsoever. And I'll say what I said earlier again. This is grossly inappropriate when we're talking about a genocide. This should not be the conversation. The conversation should not be about negotiating with Israel. The conversation should be about imposing the Sixth Fleet is in the Mediterranean. It should impose a naval blockade against Israel and immediately provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Immediately. And that's what we, as citizens, as taxpayers, need to demand of our government. The Sixth Fleet should impose an arms embargo on Israel. Not a single bullet, not a single weapon should be allowed to enter into the state of Israel. And the millions and billions of dollars that are required to rehabilitate Gaza should be paid by Israel and immediately. Not to mention this immediate and unconditional release of 10,000 Palestinians who are languishing in Israeli jails under conditions that are far worse than they've ever been before. So this should be the conversation, not whether or not Israel agrees, doesn't agree, America's longstanding position. Who cares about this? There's a genocide going on. That should be the conversation.
That's right. I'll go ahead and finish this. There's something he says at the end here, which I think is really interesting.
Those negotiations are ongoing. They've been ongoing over the weekend, and they've made progress.
So I don't expect you to answer this now, but to me, you just stick this in your pocket. If that's the case, what the hell is the point of the UN, or the UN Security Council?
So we think it plays an important role.
It does, even though its action does absolutely nothing. And that you're going to get what you would like to see, not out of the UN, but out of discussions in Doha.
So we believe it's important that the UN speak and the UN Security Council speak on matters of international security. It's why we've been engaged in this process. It's why we thought we were going to have a successful vote on Friday that Russia and China unfortunately and quite cynically vetoed. But I do believe that ultimately, if we were able to achieve a ceasefire and the release of hostages, is going to come not through a UN process, but through the process with which we've been engaged, yes, in Doha.
Okay, so that is another question that I have. What is the point of the UN if they can't actually enforce anything?
It's a very good question. And in the case of Israel, it's particularly a good question because Israel, from the very, very, very early days, from the very establishment of the state of Israel, the Israeli governments made it absolutely clear that they do not care about the United Nations. The United Nations has no relevance to them one way or the other. They don't care. And of course, the United Nations has no means to enforce, unless America decides to enforce, unless NATO allies decide to bomb somebody. Nobody has, I mean, if there's no means of enforcement, that's a very good question. What is the point? Since nobody is enforcing the resolutions, nobody cares about the resolutions, and then you've got a state like Israel, and of course, there's a double standard here. Besides, you know, if it's an African country or an Asian country or, you know, brown-skinned people, then the standard is different, perpetrating the crimes. But when it's Israel perpetrating the crimes, the United States or any of its European allies perpetrate crimes, nobody cares what the United Nations says or thinks. And this, again, negotiations with a perpetrator of a genocide? What, are they out of their minds? Who negotiates? You end it immediately and as abruptly as possible.
And I want to get your take about this as well. I'm sure you're probably aware, but it was announced that Netanyahu was supposed to arrive to D.C. to speak to Congress. I think this is a terrible idea. I think it's ridiculous to even invite him in the first place. And I believe Congressman Mike Johnson was the one that extended that invitation. Fiorella posted this earlier, breaking: Bibi Netanyahu cancels delegation trip to Washington after U.S. abstains on UN Gaza resolution. That's coming from the Times of Israel. But I also saw a post from Lindsey Graham earlier where he was with Netanyahu. So I don't know if he made it here to D.C. or not, or if Lindsey actually went to see him. But it's just the way our government basically puts the state of Israel above anyone and everything else, and it's showing some type of preference towards one group of people compared to everybody else.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, the fact that the Speaker of the House feels comfortable to invite a leader of a country that is engaged in genocide while it is engaging in genocide to come and speak and be an honorary guest, which is a huge honor for any head of state, to speak in front of a joint session, is so outrageous. I don't know, his constituents, they needs to be, I don't know, they should be blockading his office. There should be a siege on his office. What in the world is he thinking? Who does something like that? Who invites the leader of a country? He is the top of the pyramid. He's the top of the pyramid of this massive genocide that we've been seeing for months now. Tens of thousands of dead people, famine, disease. And this is all, by the way, taking place where 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive from any place in the Gaza Strip, you will have all the food, all the medical care that you could possibly need on the Israeli side, but Israel won't allow the Palestinians to have that access to the nutrition and the water and the clean and so on and so forth, that they can have a 10-minute drive. They're building a pier and sending in trucks that can't go in, rather than opening the gates of this prison and letting people go and buy food and get medicine in medical facilities and so on. So that politicians, not to mention Speaker of the House, feels confident enough that he could invite this mass murderer to speak, and he's fine with it. And there's no protest. I mean, a few people are protesting, saying something, but this is outrageous, number one. Number two, it wasn't even finalized. This was only brought up a few days ago, and it wasn't really clear whether or not it was even feasible, or if it was, when it was going to take place. So I mean, and already they announced they canceled, as though they were about to hop on the plane, and they decided, they turned the plane around. It's not that, they like to create drama where there's no drama. So I'm sure the logistics have not yet been even decided on in terms of the trip itself. And so this is Israel throwing a temper tantrum, which they like to do because, the United States abstained where Israel wanted it to veto. But I mean, we live in this absurd reality where somebody thinks it's a good idea. And quite frankly, if Netanyahu was to show up in Washington, D.C., the city needs to be completely shut down. His motorcade shouldn't be allowed to hit the road. Are you kidding me? If this actually happened. So we don't know if he actually was going to come. Right now he canceled, and now they're going to beg him to come. Then he will agree to come, maybe, maybe not. But this entire conversation, can you imagine inviting Hitler to come and speak at a joint session? And, I never compare the Holocaust, and I never made comparisons to World War II ever in my entire career. Look at anything I've ever written or said. I've never made this comparison. But now it is too similar. Can you imagine inviting Hitler to come and speak at a joint session while the Holocaust was taking place? It's time to say it as it is. And this is what it is. Now, granted, the Holocaust, this genocide didn't start on October 7th. It started 75 years ago. But this heightened, moment in the genocide calls for, I think, using the right words and saying it like it is. And it's time to say it like it is. Inviting Netanyahu would be the equivalent of bringing Hitler. And that's how we should respond to this as Americans, as citizens, as constituents.
I agree with you, Miko. And I think a lot of the problem in reference to the politicians is APAC. And that's a big question a lot of us have is how do we stop a vehicle as large and powerful as APAC, which apparently I was reading about JFK. Apparently when JFK was president, he actually wanted APAC. I think it was a different name back then, but he wanted it to register as a foreign agent. I mean, this is just unbelievable. We have this organization that's actually basically has bought our politicians, but it's working for another country. It's not even working for the United States. How is this even allowed? And then number two, do you feel there's a way to remove the Israeli lobby from DC?
The problem is not DC. What we see in Washington, there's this impression that the Israeli lobby exists in Washington, DC, and there are lobbyists here, and of course they do a lot of work here. That is just the end of a long process where Americans are indoctrinated into Zionism. It begins in elementary school. It begins in the people who run for school board and city council. It's in the textbooks. It's on TV. It's in the culture. It's in media. It's in local politics. It's in philanthropy. Zionism is so deeply rooted in American culture that what happens in Washington, D.C. is the final just the final step of making sure everything actually works. But every city, every county, every state have all these, dedicated Zionist organizations that make sure that Americans are indoctrinated into a single narrative when it comes to Israel, and that's a Zionist narrative. Nobody learns anything about Palestine. Half the people you talk to, if you say Palestine, they confuse it with Pakistan. And the ones who don't have a clue what you're talking about. They know that there's some terrorism, maybe settlements, maybe some kind of a war. Nobody knows anything. There is no education on Palestine. There is no context on Palestine. The only context Americans have, and again, it's everywhere, in the churches. I mean, everywhere you go, there is a very dominant story of the Jews returning to their homeland. There's the religion, there's the history, there's the Holocaust, and it's all over the place. Americans can't hide from it. They can't avoid it. It's everywhere. So by the time somebody runs for office, you don't need APAC to make them vote for Israel. So APAC makes sure that it's the most extreme version of support of Israel, that there's absolutely no gaps, no cracks whatsoever. That's what they do. But it starts long before. And you know how many, when you exist here in Washington, there's so many other Israeli Zionist nonprofits that are even worse than APAC that operate in Palestine. There's horrifyingly racist, violent organizations that pretend to be nonprofits that send money to buy weapons for settlers, that do horrible things to Palestinians on a regular basis, to steal their land, to steal their homes, and on and on and on, to get rid of Palestinians in Jerusalem. I mean, the list goes on forever. So it is so deeply rooted. And again, there's no equivalent on the other side. Our job, I believe, or part of our job, has to start with creating more context regarding Palestine. If Israel is here in the American consciousness, Palestinian doesn't exist. We have to start elevating Palestine so that there's some sense of understanding of a Palestine within American culture, within the American consciousness, And we're at least a century behind on this. But this is the problem. APAC is just the end of the very last step of this.
It's interesting, too, because if I think about what happened to American descendants of slavery in this country, like there are actually politicians that are trying to remove that history from textbooks as we speak. Right. But that would never happen in reference to Israel. It would never happen. And it's just like people see these things happening all around us. And it's like, they've whitewashed indigenous history in this country. They've whitewashed the history of the Black Panthers, other revolutionary leaders in this country. It's been completely whitewashed when you actually learn about what those leaders were really fighting for. I played a number of videos on this show from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and their perception about Zionism and the Palestinian people, and also on Nelson Mandela. And again, these things are not taught in school. So it's always like you have to educate yourself.
And that's the problem, because people don't. People don't. It's like people think that reparations, the descendants of slaves need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. All this talk of reparations is just, they're getting all this free stuff. But that's the common conversation in most of America. That's the common conversation. If you say reparations, people think you're some kind of extremist. Whereas, it is clearly that without that, you're never going to get to where American society needs to be. I agree with you. This is and they would not dare to do what you were suggesting in terms of the education. They will not. It's going to take, to remove the Zionist elements within American education is a Herculean task.
I agree. And I want to pivot to this topic here. I want to talk to you about definitions, because I'm sure you heard about what has happened to Candace Owens in reference to the Daily Wire. They have removed her. She was criticized heavily and she didn't even criticize Israel harshly, I would say. She was just basically, saying that like she didn't approve of the death toll, like the death of all these kids. She said not just because of a humanitarian issue, but also she's a mother, right? So even that in itself was problematic. There was something that came up in this interview that she had with Rabbi Barclay about the definition of anti-Semitism. And there's something I want to show you, because I feel like this is another Zionist talking point. Listen to this part right here.
I am not going to be able to agree that definition should be able to transform according to what's happening during the day. But here's what I will say. If you could, just because I think it's really important for us to get to going through this article, because then you might be able to explain why you view it as anti-Semitism. If you could just give us what you are saying the current definition of anti-Semitism is today, that would be very helpful.
The current definition of anti-Semitism today has to do with what the feelings are. It has to do with anti-Zionism, number one.
I have to pause it there. Miko, what feelings are?
Oh my God! I mean, this is unfreaking believable, right? I mean, anti-Semitism is a form of racism that directed at Jews. Zionism has nothing to do with anything. Zionism is a whole different reality. In fact, anti-Semitism is just as racist as Zionism. I'll say it again. Anti-Semitism is just as racist as Zionism, or maybe the other way around. Zionism is just as dangerous of a racist ideology as anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism doesn't change. Racism is racism. Racism doesn't change based on the weather or the mood of the particular, Zionist rabbi. This is ridiculous. What are you talking about? Racism doesn't have, shades of gray. Racism is a very clear thing. You oppose it, you reject it, or you're part of it. That's it. It's very simple. And if you support Zionism, you may as well support anti-Semitism. If you declare yourself a Zionist, you're declaring yourself a racist who supports genocide. That's it. But what they do, these Zionists, first of all, they create these strange rabbis. I don't know where these rabbis get their religious education, because Zionism is an affront to Judaism. Zionism is a I'll say it again, it's an affront. It contravenes Jewish law in so many ways. It's a secular, racist, settler colonial ideology that, look at what it produced. Look what Zionism produced. Look at the last 75 years, 80 years in Palestine. Look at the horrific violence that has been, that Zionism has created in Palestine. Who brought terrorism? Who brought racism? Who brought violence? Who brought the ethnic cleansing and the genocide to Palestine? Zionists did. Zionism did. But again, most Americans don't have that context. They don't even know that there was a Palestine. Right. They forgot, even though any map before May 1948 called it Palestine. Every book called it Palestine. Every tourist called it Palestine. Everyone who went to do pilgrimage, anyone who did commerce, the world was doing commerce with Palestine. Palestine was a very rich, had a rich economy, a rich culture, cities and towns, and it was a bustling country, and it was called Palestine. So people kind of forgot. But anti-Semitism changes with the political mood of a particular rabbi. I mean, can you imagine? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. What kind of but she was like embarrassed and kind of, you can see she was so on her body language. She's so uncomfortable talking about this because, it's you see one thing and they tell you another thing and you don't want to call him a liar, but he's a liar. He's an absolute liar. Racism doesn't shift, doesn't change. It's absolute.
Thank you so much for saying that, because it's just now actually there was a host on the Daily Wire that is now saying that it's anti-Semitic to say Christ is king. So now there's like this battle between like Christians, right-wing Christians that actually used to watch the Daily Wire, and they're like, what is happening with this outlet, etc. If you can change the definition as much as you want to, then anything could be labeled as that. And it gets to be very scary, I think.
Well, and that's the point. Fear, intimidation, confusion these are exactly the tactics that the Zionists use every single day, and they come up with a new thing all the time. You know, a few years ago, they came out with this new working definition of anti-Semitism, which includes examples that are examples within this working definition, and they have Israel as part of these examples. Suddenly, Israel is part of Zionism is part of the definition of anti-Semitism, and then they started this campaign forcing governmental and non-governmental organizations and agencies to pass resolutions that adopt this very vague, very strange new definition of anti-Semitism that just causes confusion, and it has Israel inside it. So now nobody wants to criticize Israel because you don't want to be called anti-Semitic, because you're going to lose your job, you're going to be an outcast, and on and on and on and on, because people are afraid of this. And that's the point. To create confusion and fear is precisely the tactic. That's what they do. And instead of standing up to them and saying, no, racism is racism, you don't get to call the shots, you don't get to define and create this atmosphere of fear and intimidation, they win. Because when a bully is allowed to, go on bullying, they will. Until we stand up and say, absolutely not, you're done, you have no seat at the table, that is when they capitulate. But nobody's done that with Israel. Nobody's done it with Zionism yet. People are, reluctant to do that.
Miko, how do you feel when people say some of the talking points? I've been trying to brainstorm with people about how to push back on Zionist talking points. How do you feel when people say Israel has a right to exist?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. There's a lot to unpack with this. So, did apartheid South Africa have a right to exist?
Oh.
That's because Israel is the equivalent of apartheid South Africa. It's a regime. It's a political regime. So, did apartheid have a right to exist? And if you say no, does that mean all white South Africans need to be killed? That's the equivalent. That's the equivalent. Okay, now Israel is a much more significant and deeper term than apartheid. Apartheid is ugly. Israel is biblical. To say that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, right away people go, oh my God, I don't know what to say. What am I going to say? Yes, am I going to say no? Is it apartheid is easy. Does Jim Crow had a right to exist? Did systemic apartheid in America have a right to exist? I don't think there's any doubt that the answer is no. But with Israel, because it's framed as a biblical thing, it's framed around the Jewish people, then people, they get paralyzed. They don't know what to say. They're scared. That's precisely why they frame it like this. Does an apartheid state have a right to exist? Of course not. Of course not. Does it mean that all Jews have to be killed? No, but the only ones that say that the two things are connected are the Zionists themselves. Nobody else says that. So that's, we need to get to the bottom, to the root of the reason of the question. Not accept the premise of the question, but understand what is it that they're trying to do when they're asking us the question, and reject the premise, because they're trying to make you say something that then they can accuse you of anti-Semitism or supporting the Holocaust or something like that.
Those are really good points. I hope people are taking notes, because I've been telling people before we have to come up with a way to push back on some of these talking points, including this one. This is from Marianne Williamson. She is asked about, again, Israel's right to exist, but also this idea of sovereignty for the Palestinian people. This interview here with Brianna Joy Gray, I want you to hear this part here.
To whatever extent there are unjust, undemocratic laws towards anyone in Israel, and they are not across the board as is pictured by some, that needs to be changed. But to me, that does not necessitate the destruction of the state of Israel.
But do you see what I'm saying, Marianne? There's a difference between there could be a state of Israel that was inclusive. This is like the one-state solution, right? There could be a state of Israel that's inclusive of the what, 5 million people or so that live in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, where they have equal rights as all Jewish and Arab Israelis.
The occupation of the West Bank is illegal. The occupation of the West Bank did not exist before 1967, 1968, when all those changes occurred because of the war. So you could still have an Israeli state and dismantle the occupation and also those settlements which are illegal. That does not.
So would that mean, would you endorse the full right of return of all the Palestinians?
That would probably mean that needs to be completely, has to be a negotiation for a two-state solution. There has to be a negotiation for a two-state solution. I would ask you, when you talk about a one-state solution, who is going to govern that one state? What is going to be the governance of this one state? And if these people are killing each other the way they are now, not even the majority of them living in the same place, to me, the idea of a one-state solution is a setup for a bloody civil war such as we have never seen. So
there's a couple of things built in there, you know, Marianne. I mean, part of the problem is, I think, the characterization of killing each other as though there haven't been enormous asymmetries long before October 7th of who is dying.
You know what? I'm not going there. I have said for years, for years, I have been decrying, and this is well on record. For years, I've decried the settlements. For years, I have decried the occupation. For years, I have decried the siege. For years, and I'm on record. And I also have called for a ceasefire, not only from the day it began, but even before. But this is my honest belief. I'm at this point, and because I'm where I am in the campaign, there are people who, no matter what I say, and on this as well as everything else, like you said before, I'm not changing my basic beliefs. And I believe that, as I said before, that the United States should have an equally robust commitment to the safety and the security and the sovereignty of both peoples. And I've written, if somebody goes to marianne2024.com, I have a whole section there on Israel and Palestine. Everything I've written, everything I have said on video, and one of the things that I've become very aware of is that anything I say, there are those who will take something out of context, even like when you say RBN, because you had mentioned that to me before, and I wasn't quite sure. Well, if he called me a Zionist, that wasn't based on anything I said, I assure you.
Okay, Miko, I'm pretty sure you know I actually don't agree with a two-state solution. A couple of reasons. Number one, there's too many settlements in the West Bank. Number two, that would mean that the Palestinian people would be allowed to have a military, which I don't think Israel would ever allow to happen. I think the two-state solution at this point in time is just, it's not realistic. But this idea of a one-state solution, and thinking about what Marianne said there and the right to return and who would govern that state, I want to hear your opinion about that.
Well, to begin with, she's either totally ignorant or she's lying. There's no third option. Those are the options. And I've seen her here in DC, and I challenged her, and she said, well, Israel is not going anywhere. Well, I'm not sure Israel is not going anywhere. Israel is a racist apartheid regime that needs to be dismantled. Separating the West Bank from the rest of the country is based either, again, somebody's either ignorant or they're lying. There is no separation. There's no difference between the two different parts of Palestine. It's all occupied. It's been occupied. There's no Israel and then an occupied Palestine. It's all occupied Palestine. There's no settlements that are okay and settlements that are illegal. Every Israeli settlement was built, every Israeli city, every Israeli town, every Israeli village, every Israeli farm was built on stolen land. With few exceptions. Very, very few exceptions. Israelis are all settlers. I am a child and I was a settler. Israelis are settlers. They're living on stolen land, stolen property, stolen country. From the very beginning, that was the very intent of the creation of the state of Israel, was to steal Palestine from its people and give it to settlers. That's it. That's it. Who will govern? I don't know who governs any democracy. The people that whoever people vote for. You have a democratic state And people go to elections and they vote for the people that they want to be governed by, or at least, you know, the worst of all, whatever. You know, that's what you do. That's who governs them. You know how many nations there are that used to kill each other and then they became a nation? You know, I had this conversation with a Spanish reporter a few weeks ago. You know, Spain was ripped apart. I still remember in my lifetime, Spain had a fascist regime, as did Portugal. Greece was governed by a military junta. These countries were torn apart. There were civil wars. They made it up. They created a democratic state. They created a democracy. And Spain is divided. You know, I mean, you know, Catalan was almost wanted to cede from Spain. It's not like, you know, everybody there sees thing eye to eye. But you create a democratic structure. You eliminate the racist elements. You dismantle the apartheid state. You allow the right of return. You put in mechanisms that allow the refugees, the Palestinian refugees, to return to their home and their land. And if anybody doesn't want to live with Arabs, they shouldn't be living in an Arab country. Palestine is an Arab country. It was an Arab country going back, you know, a very long time. If any Europeans don't want to live with Arabs, they can go back to Europe. I don't know, go somewhere else. But Palestine is an Arab country. It was an Arab country. And the fact that the last 75, 80 years, they've been controlled by a racist apartheid state mostly governed by Europeans doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. It's still Palestine. And so you dismantle the apartheid state, you create the democratic institutions, and then people vote. You allow, you know, Israel has 10,000 political prisoners. They're all political prisoners, by the way. There's the vast majority of Palestinian prisoners languishing in horrific conditions, in torture conditions in Israeli jails, including friends of mine who have been recently arrested again. You know, they're political prisoners. They can form political parties. They'll run for office. There'll be a legislature. People will vote. And whoever wins will govern. You create a constitution. Israel never had a constitution, of course. The idea that it could be in Israel is absurd. It's like maintaining apartheid and creating a democracy. You can't have it both ways. And then you have a free democratic Palestine with equal rights, where everybody who lives in historic Palestine between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea have the same equal democratic rights. And you put in mechanisms that will allow the refugees who have been forced out and denied the right to return and be paid reparations and be compensated. And you rehabilitate Gaza. $4 billion a year coming from America can go to that instead of buying weapons. So there are ways to do this. We've seen this before. We're not reinventing the wheel.
Thank you so much for saying that. And one more question I do have for you as well, Nico. This is another one where I noticed I've seen a lot of debates about Israel and Palestine, and also when Candace Owens was smeared as anti-Semitic. I feel like people are not making this talking point. And please let me know. I'm going to show you this definition. Please let me know if I misunderstand or if something has changed. I looked up the definition of Semite, and let me see if I can make this bigger here. And let me know if I misunderstand, because, you know, things change. But it says a member of any of a number of peoples of ancient Southwestern Asia, including the Akkadians, Phoenicians, Hebrews, and Arabs, a descendant of these people, a member of a modern people speaking a Semitic language. So by this definition, that tells me that Palestinians are also Semites. So if I'm correct, let me know if I'm not, but if I'm correct, then why are people who are supporting the pro-Palestinian movement, why are we being called anti-Semitic?
That's a very good question. Palestinians are far more Semitic than I am. I mean, look at the color of my skin. I don't know if you can see through the, I mean, there's not a drop of Semitic DNA in me. You know, I'm 99.7%, you know, European Jew. Actually, I took the 23andMe just to make a point, and that was precisely the point. You know, now the term anti-Semitism became, you know, equivalent to you know, racism directed at Jewish people. So that's kind of become the common name for racism directed at Jewish people, anti-Semitism. But of course, Palestinians are Semites. They're far more Semites than most Jews, unless Jews, the Jews that came from Arab countries. You know, it's absurd. So to look into the definition of Semite and then discuss anti-Semitism is an interesting thing. But the point is, you know, anti-Semitism became the accepted term for racism directed at Jews. Fine. You know what? Okay. But to say that Palestinians are somehow not Semites and to blame Palestinians for being anti-Semitic is first of all, historically, not only are Arabs Semites, but Jewish people lived very well in the Arab world until Zionists came and destroyed that. You know, there's a great book, I have it behind me somewhere, by Avi Shleim, who was an Iraqi Jew, who talks about the exodus of the Jews from Iraq. And when Israel was established, you know, the Holocaust survivors didn't come, only very, very few. The wealthy Jews, American Jews, European Jews, had no interest whatsoever in going to live in Palestine, even though they renamed it and called it Israel. So then finally the Zionists said, well, let's bring the Arab Jews. Well, the Arab Jews had nothing to do with Zionism. So in Baghdad, what they did to get, there's some 120,000 Jews of Baghdad. And I know this sounds, if people haven't heard this before, it sounds like conspiracy, but it's actually factually true. The Mossad had agents who put bombs in synagogues and Jewish institutions to scare the Jews away. You know, I've got the book right here, Avi Shleim's book. People should get this book. It's a very, very good book. It's the Memoir of an Arab Jew. Avi Shleim, it just came out. He's a great historian. He's a great historian, and he's a great guy. And he's been doing a lot of interviews. You might want to interview him. Actually, he'd be a great person to interview. He lives in the UK, and he describes. Now, I knew about this story, you know, because I'm in this world, but a lot of people have no idea that this is true. So yeah, so there are Jews that are Semites, but these are probably Jews like him who grew up or lived or, you know, came out of the Arab world. But I mean, look at me. Do I look like a Semite? I'm probably Ukrainian, Russian, you know, whatever. So again, Palestinians are Semite. There's no question that Arabs are Semite and European Jews are not. But again, this goes back to this need to create this, to support the myth that Jews are a nation, kind of like other nations. Whereas according to Jewish law, and there's a famous saying by a famous rabbi who lived in the 12th century. He actually lived in Baghdad, in Iraq. And he wrote that the people of Israel are people united by their faith, not by a language or a country or a state or a culture. That's why you can have Jews who are Yemenite Jews and Jews who are Polish or Ukrainian Jews. They have nothing in common but their faith. They follow the same religious laws. So Jewish people are a nation united by their religious laws, not by all this other definition, kind of modern definition of nationalism. This was an invention that the Zionists created, a myth that the Zionists created in order to create this, you know, we have a nation, we're a people, we have a country, we have to go back, we have a history. What's your history? Oh, the Bible is our history. Wait, what? The Bible is now a history book? Well, you talk to people and they say, yes, the Bible is a history book. Since when? What are we talking about? The Bible is not a history book. It's a book of faith. There's no history. There's very little history that supports most of the stories in the Bible. It has nothing to do with history, you know? So these are all inventions that the Zionists created, and then they're very good at pushing these stories, this mythology into, like I said, American culture, American education system, American press, American TV, on and on and on and on. So now suddenly everybody knows, yeah, the Bible is the history of the Jews. What are you talking about? It's not the history of anybody. It's a book of faith. And the Jews are a religious minority. They could be Polish or Yemenite or Iraqi or anything else.
So, Miko, then how do you push back? So if someone is, if they're European, like yourself, because what will happen is, like Rabbi Barclay, who mentioned this later in the interview with Candace, he will say that he is ethnically Jewish and that is its own category, right?
Can you convert to become, can I convert and become black?
No.
No, you cannot convert into another ethnicity. If that was true, you couldn't convert to become a Jew. You can convert to become a Jew, right? You can convert into Judaism. You can't convert to become, I can't convert suddenly to become, an Indian. I can't, I can't. I can maybe become a Hindu, but not an Indian. You can't convert into a race, into an ethnicity. You can only convert into a religion. Judaism, by its own definition, Judaism defines what it means to be a Jew, right? What it means to be Jewish. You know, there's no such thing as ethnic Jewish ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing. Judaism is a religion. It's a faith. It's a book. You follow the laws. You accept them. You are Jewish. You can convert. If you don't, you're, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Their claim, the Zionists trying to kind of peddle and peddle and peddle. It's like peddling water. You know, they're only creating bubbles. There's no substance to it. And unless you spent your life studying this and learning this and reading about this, it's really hard to answer these things. Because how can you tell somebody that, you know, you got to have the background to be able to push back on this, and it's not easy. Bless her heart. It was, you know.
Well said, Miko, because, you know, I had questions. I've had questions, and I was wondering, I was just kind of like, But then, you know, again, if you start asking these questions, then people point fingers at you and they say that you're, you know, anti-Semitic, or for friends of mine that are Jewish, but they're anti-Zionist, they've been called self-hating, you know, Jews.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And the thing is, people take it seriously. Do I care if these racists call me what they call me? They're the racists. I don't need to apologize for who I am and what I say. Neither do you. They're the racists. They're the ones who are supporting genocide. They're calling us names. They are calling us names. These genocidal maniacs are calling us names.
I hear you. Miko, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, where can people find your work?
Wow. Well, I'm on all the social media platforms, so people kind of find me on Twitter, on Patreon, on YouTube, on Instagram. Miko Peled, just type it in and I show up, and people are happy. I'm happy if people want to, you know, send me messages, or on any of the platforms. I'll respond, or somebody will respond. So I'm everywhere. And, you know, the book, The General Son, is available everywhere. So yeah, very easy to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miko.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.